All right, so today's topic is really one of we've gone through all of these fundamentals. We've gone through the start of how do we engage with that proper ICP, the ideal client profile. We've built the list, we've done our prospecting, we've done our discovery call, and we've done all of that. And now we're to the point of getting it through the pipeline to close. So that's the idea behind this. So we're presentation, but there's all of these steps in between that we're going to kind of review. That is going to be it's really critical to everything that we do. After we get it started, how do we bring it through? So that's the idea. And now I think Devin and Wade, don't answer this because I think you know the answer, but let's see. DeQuill and Josh, are you familiar by chance with how to take all of the contents in this jar and get it to fit without removing any, like decreasing the type of stuff that goes in there? So with the same exact material in the same exact jar, do you know how to take what doesn't fit here and get it to fit?
Are we supposed to see a illustration?
It would probably be helpful if I did that. So thank you for asking. So here it is. So that was what was making it a little bit more difficult, Josh. I wanted to make it hard. Okay, so how do you take this jar with its contents and get it to the point where it fits without removing any material, meaning reducing the amount of material that goes into it? How do we get it to fit? Can't make a bigger jar. Go ahead.
Yeah, we take the rocks out and sand out, put the rocks in first, and then the sand on top.
Yeah, so that's spot on. So here it is. Order matters, process matters. And so the idea is this: if the jars are time and the rocks are the priorities, oftentimes we can't get to what's important because we allow all of the distractions and the day-to-day stuff to get in the way. So we deal with the sand, emails and this and that and everything else, and then we throw in the pebbles, and then we finally get to the rocks, and then unfortunately it looks like this, and we can't change it up. So order matters, process matters. So that illustration is used to really identify and define how we're going to take this sale through, because order and process matters. So if you get nothing else out of this today, I want you to get that order and process matter. If we get in the wrong order or do the wrong steps, we're going to look like this and we're in trouble. And that doesn't allow us to hit our goals. All right. So who here knows this one? Anyone old enough to know these guys?
The Talking Heads.
Yeah, good for you, Wade. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's the Talking Heads. How did we get here? So it was once in a lifetime, 1980. So I'm showing my age. How did I get here? Right. So how did we get here? What we've done is we created that ideal customer profile, that ideal client profile. We created a good list. We did really good business development, whether it was a quantity play, whether we're doing account-based marketing where it's more targeted. And then we got them to a meeting. And then within that meeting, we got to uncover their why. What's that emotional, compelling reason of why they're going to take action, right? And that's critical. If we don't understand that emotional, compelling reason why they're going to act, then it's a disqualify. We cannot move it forward. So then once we identify, hey, they are willing to act, and we will absolutely, we see the business case here. So I don't know what your business case is, but typically speaking, my world, it's always like a 10X. If I can find that they have a $30,000 cost, and I'm going to give them $300,000 in increased revenue or cost savings or something like that, that's my 10X. I'm fairly comfortable in going forward. I like to have about $1 million, but we identify that emotional compelling reason why to take action, and then also that business case. And then we make sure that they're ready, willing, and able to make any and all investments. So we really dig down to what's the time involved, what's the commitment, what's the political capital that you're going to have to spend. So all of that information we need to know. So why are you going to act? What's the business case to act? are you ready, willing, and able to make any and all investments? And then identifying all of those investments with them. And then we take them through the rest of the process, right? We started with the outreach call all the way through that exploratory meeting, pipeline management. So however long it takes to get through the why to change, and then the investment side, right? So that takes it through to pipeline management. So this is really where we're picking it up in this end of stage 2. And you could have also maybe sent this to contract legal if you wanted to get ahead of the game, depending on how long that takes. But we're definitely at the end of stage 2 and before stage 4. So whatever your process looks like. So we have the beginning and the end at every single stage, and the whole entire time we're driving with these hashtag next steps. All right, so that was a whole lot of monologuing. So let me pause there and get some feedback, some questions on what we just covered. What questions and what pushback might you have about what I just said? How are we doing it today? Yeah. What do you think? How are we doing it today? Are we following that approach, a different approach?
Well, I know I'm on my end for what we're doing. We're really strict in following that type of approach in dealing with our customers and taking them through that process of that. So that what you just showed is very similar to what we're doing here.
Okay.
With me and Mike. So.
Perfect. Now, the easy thing is to get it, to understand it, right? That's the easy part. The hard part is the yeah, it's all the humanness, right? Because you have your plan, and then they show up and do their plan, and the details matter and the nuances matter there. And I'm kind of curious, Wade and Devin, are you following this framework, or are you still working on developing that framework?
I think we're still working on, developing our framework, but I don't think we're far off by any means.
Yeah, and that's my sense too, that you're not far off at all. And here's the deal, right? And like DeQuil said, whenever you throw humans into this, that's whenever things get really quirky and really interesting. And so that's where what we're going to talk about today, this timeline technique, is really going to be helpful for us. So we'll pass it along through this timeline technique. So let me give you the setup of how we've gotten here. All right. So the setup is this. We've done all of those steps. We've built an environment of trust, comfort, and credibility at a peer-to-peer level. We've uncovered their emotional compelling reason why they're going to change. And then we've also identified that they're ready and willing and able to make all of their investments. So that's where we are right here. And so that would have probably been somewhere between discovery call, that initial exploratory call, maybe a meeting or two into it, depending on how complex your offering is. So we would get to this part. And then right before we get to this timeline, and this is critical, right before we get to the timeline, because this might be the next meeting, we want to always start the next meeting with reviewing where we came from, how we got here, and then ask the most critical question: what's changed? So I'm kind of curious, Devin, Wade, DeQuil, Josh, you've probably seen this too. You definitely have seen this. Have you found that, you had in your mind exactly what's happened? This was going to be the closing call just to show up. I don't know why they even show up oftentimes. And then everything's completely different. Anyone other than me have that happen? Yeah. So that's where it's so vitally important to make sure that we can see, hey, has anything changed from last time? Let's review how we got here. And I would encourage you to ask them to summarize it, especially if you're with multiple people. Have your champion summarize it, and you can add color to it, add a little bit of flavor to it. That way they own it, because the whole entire thing here that we want to do is have them own the whole entire process. So we want to use those open-ended questions that we've been talking about, where we're doing the soften and dig, the label, the mirror, we're leveraging right and win tactics. And then we're looking to disqualify. And why disqualify as opposed to qualify? Why the nuanced difference there?
To know, you want to know.
Yep.
If it's a no, I want to know. Yeah, go ahead. What else, Devin?
So that's what I was gonna say.
Okay, and that's definitely one part of it, but there's even a slightly more important other side of the coin to that. So if it's a no, I want to know, and what else? You got this, Josh?
Yeah, it's pushing them to the no, takes the pressure off of them, as well as it's we talked about it, push them to the no, so it makes them think yes.
100%. I can be a lot. Hey, Devin's giving you a hand. Nice. I can
Mhm.
I can be so much more clear and transparent in what yes means whenever I've tried to give you the out. Whenever I've driven you to the no, there's no pressure in the no. And so the harder I drive to that disqualification, the harder I drive to that no. If it's a no, I want to know. If it's an NO, I want a KNOW, just like Devin and Wade said. But that also allows me to be more bold and go after specificity in what yes means. So that's why we want to disqualify the opportunity. Or listen, if we can't disqualify it, we got to take action. Right? My line is this: decisive people or leaders, are they decisive or, well, let me get back up. Are good leaders decisive or indecisive?
Decisive.
Very much decisive, right? So my viewpoint is this: whenever I'm in a sales call, my goal is to help this person to be a good, decisive leader by making it so emotionally impelling that they act in a way that's going to be for their best interest, right? So I need them to act in a way that's going to be helpful. So that's my mindset going in. So that's where a lot of people are like, this is manipulation. No, it's not. Well, it might be, but it's not negative manipulation. It's just like my daughter who had surgery, went to the PT, right? Went to physical therapy. That's manipulation. That hurts like crazy, but it needs to be done for their benefit. Right? It's manipulation whenever you're really trying to get that person that's hopped up on drugs or alcohol or whatever the case may be to get that emotional, compelling reason why they're going to act to help their life out. And that's kind of the way that I view this. So it might be a little bit idealistic, altruistic. So, all right, got it. But that's kind of how I go through it. I'm kind of curious, your mindset whenever you're going through this. Do you do anything like that? Or what's your mindset as you're employing some of these tactics? I like the birds in the background, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me.
No, I like it. It's great.
I have my back door open.
Rub it in. It's like freezing here.
Oh, is it? I guess my mindset is to really kind of buckle down to the point of where we're going to get a decision, right? We've gone through the process and everything, and we've made sure we checked all the boxes, and to make sure that at this point in the interaction that we're going to get a decision, right? But are we going to go? Is it going to be a yes or is it going to be a no, right? So I think that's the mind frame that I'm in at that point. Okay, are we going to pull the trigger?
Yeah. And I think the Challenger sales model does a really nice job here. What's it called? The Challenger buyer, right? So there was a Challenger sales, and then there was, I think the sequel to that was a Challenger buyer. And it goes to that point, DeQuil, right? Is how do we get a decision, but leveraging that disqualification so it doesn't come across pushy. Other mindsets that we go into this? Because mindset is critically important on this. All right, take that as a no. So here's how we go. Timeline. Here's how we begin, right? So we work with the mindset to disqualify the buyer and the opportunity because there's no pressure there. And we decide we want to define the decision-making process because it's going to be different with each and every one. Now, oftentimes they have no idea how to buy what it is that you're selling because maybe they haven't done it before, or they do it so infrequently, they do it in a stupid way, like send you through procurement, which isn't going to be helpful to anyone, right? So you help them define the way that they should make that buying process. Then you help them to set better outcomes, right? The reason that people don't make decisions is they're unsure. So we help them to identify the outcomes so they actually will make a decision, and we have collaboration with the buyer. Now, why is collaboration so critically important? What do you think?
You get to know where they're coming from, what they're looking for, what their needs are, instead of you just kind of pitching.
Agreed. That's definitely a key part of it. Go ahead, Devin.
I was going to say, based on, your point earlier, it helps them sort of lead themselves to the sale to some degree.
Yep. And Wade, you came off mute.
Yeah, builds trust, starts building that relationship as well.
Yeah, their fingerprints are all over it. If it's their idea, they can't argue with it. If it's their idea, they're the genius, not you. So it goes into that hero's journey, right? So enable that collaboration with the buyer. So it's you and that person against the world, right? You and that team. Hey, I'm on your side. Let's win this for you, right? Because they won it. They're likely the champion that's going through this. And then deal with the stalls and objections. You know the specific places where you're going to see slowdown, so stalls and objections. So you want to hit that before. Right. So if it's going to be a problem, we have there's a great book out there called Culture by Design. And I almost didn't read it because culture is really there and you can just tease it out. So I didn't like the name of the book, Culture by Design, but I read it nevertheless because it was suggested. And what they tell you to do is you identify the behaviors, the actions that your team is going to take in order to live out those core values, right? So ever see those core values that no one ever lives out? It's just up on the wall for who knows why. Ever see a company like that? Right? So we look to avoid that by giving those core values, and so, or those guiding behaviors. And one of our guiding behaviors is we run to danger. With this idea in mind, we want to run to the battle. We want to run to danger, because if there's a problem, we want to blow it up and get it out of the way. Because if it's a no, if it's an NO, I want a KNOW as quickly as possible. So we want to deal with those stalls and objections as quickly as possible, as early as possible in the process. And then it really tells you how the buyer wants to buy, right? Because here's the challenge, and I'll get a lot of flack for this because a lot of sales leaders will wholly disagree with me. Most sales leaders think that you can dictate when this is going to close, right? You can't. My contention is you can't dictate when it's going to close. You can influence it, definitely, but you can't mandate whenever it's going to close. So allow the buyer to buy the way the buyer wants to buy, and have enough prospecting activity in the front end, so whenever they do come to close, you still hit your number. See, your sales process and your upfront contracts, like we talked about, or those hashtag next steps, or your strength within your sales process is going to be directly proportional to your prospecting activity and the size quality of your pipeline. If you have a crap pipeline and you haven't had any prospecting activities, you're not pushing anything through because you have like 3 deals and you need them all to close and there's a lot of pressure. But if you have a ton of prospecting activity and your pipeline is full, you can have confidence like you can't believe. And then the cool thing is, people like hanging out with confidence, and that confidence eludes or exudes out of you and gets other people to take action. And it's crazy how that works. Have you ever seen that happen, right? Where you're just in the flow, you have everything going for you and stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that closed. I never thought that would close, just because you're in the groove and things are happening. Who has a story for that? Go ahead, Devin.
I don't know if I have a story I think I have the opposite story of that from time to time that I can imagine, especially, right? And maybe it's just sticking out more, but
Yeah.
I can imagine when you don't have the pipeline, right? And it feels like you're putting too much pressure on the sale, and sort of what that looks like, and how poorly that generally goes. So, I get it from that perspective.
Yeah,
too.
your commission breath is all over the place, right? Because you're so desperate for that because you need it. And that's how oftentimes we can get a bad rap. And so the cure to that is your prospecting activity and how strong your next steps are. And that's why it's so vitally important. So yeah, thanks for that, Devin. All right, so the timeline approach. Order matters, right? So like we showed earlier, you put the rocks in first. So order matters. So here's what it is. Believe it or not, you want to start with when. Starting with that timeline, you want to start with when. And here's a curious little thing about this. If you start with when, using the right and win tactic, they'll lay everything out for you. There is a show that my in-laws used to watch. It was called, what the heck was it? Something about a dress. It was a wedding dress. Anyone know that show? It was a reality show. Anyway.
Say yes to the dress.
Yes, thank you. Say yes to the dress. That was it. So, and they did a really nice thing when in that say yes to the dress, they asked, hey, what's the most that you would be willing to pay, right? Or what's the most that you can afford, right? So they anchor it high and you can work underneath of it. Now, in this timeline approach, by when, like, when's the furthest out that you can push this? And if you do that, there's zero pressure. And hey, what's the furthest out that you can push this? There's zero pressure there. Just like, hey, what's the max number that you want to make sure that we stay under so we can get you what you want, right? Worded that way, it's no pressure. Hey, what's the latest that we can have this resolved for you, implemented, and you want to have real specificity on what complete means, right? So the more clear that you can have of absolutely what euphoria looks like, what your nirvana looks like, because we've done everything and it's working, they're trained, everything's working wonderfully. Their pain bullets that we found, right? Their challenges that they're facing are completely solved, right? That's what we want to lay out. By when would you want to see that happen and you're realizing the results? And then from there, you can work backwards, right? And again, this is all question based. So tell me a little bit about why those dates, why is that significant? What's the furthest out that you can push the implementation to achieve that? What's the soonest that you can realize complete implementation? Now, why do we want to ask that one? What's the soonest that you would be able to realize a complete implementation of this? Why is that an important question?
Hey, man, it feels kind of like a walking backwards approach of
Yeah,
where are we
definitely.
today and how do we need to get there. But
Yep. What else?
You can see how big it will impact them, because if they say, we'll see it immediately once it's done, then it's a pretty big deal. They need to take care of it right now.
Okay. Good answers. Yes. Not what I'm looking for though.
I would say it kind of gives you an idea of what their expectations are.
Oh, I like that one. I didn't even think of that one. Yeah, it definitely gives you their idea of expectations. Great one. I hadn't even thought about it, but not the one I was looking for. I'll throw it out here. It's this. Bandwidth. Because oftentimes, and I would think, especially with what you three, DeQuill, Wade, and Devin are doing, there's probably a lot of input and bandwidth that you're going to need in working with these folks, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So if I'm taking up a lot of bandwidth for these folks, I want to find out what is the available bandwidth. How quickly can he implement this without burning everyone else, having people quit, having this like blow up in your face, right? So that gives me a range of the two timelines. What's the earliest that you complete it, knowing all of this work, and what's the latest that you can push this out and still keep your job and get what you want, right? So that gives me an idea, and that's going to really allow you to determine your timeline. So let's try this out. We want to start out with today's date, so let's do this, and let's take a real world example. So who has an opportunity in the pipeline that we can try this out? All right, let's just make one up then. All right, so we'll say, hey, here's today's date. If I can get the pen work. All right, so here's today's date. So it's, what is it, 12/29. All All right, so it's 12:29. DeQuill, what's the furthest that we can delay having this purchased, implemented, people trained, it working, we're realizing the ROI that we're anticipating from this? What's the furthest out that we can push this? What's that date?
March 1st.
Okay, so we're at March 1st. Now, out of role play, I screwed up. Your day goes right here, sorry.
Right.
All right, so March 3rd or 1st, so that's 3/1/22, right?
Yep.
Okay, now in order to hit that 3/1/22, let's talk about what all we'll need to do in order to achieve that timeline. So from your perspective, how do we go through this process? Is there legal? Is there IT? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, so there is a legal aspect to the process. We would definitely need to do get some estimates done, and then from that, I guess we would definitely need to see a proposal, because we want to see what it actually looks like.
So whenever you say see what it actually looks like, is that like a proof of concept or
Proof of concept, yes.
okay? So so we'll need some time for that proof of concept to work. Okay, what else is involved?
And then we would definitely need to meet with your team, and your team meet with my team to kind of work out some of the specifics and questions that I haven't asked that need to be asked, to kind of work those out also.
Okay, so really that solutioning session, nail down that scope of it.
Yes.
Okay, now how about training? Do we have to worry about training?
Yeah. So once we get past that, and we get everything scoped, and we get it approved, and everything, the work goes into order, we would definitely need to be trained on that. Then we do have an implementation stage, how that's going to work, a handoff at the end, and then any type of support or maintenance that may come after that.
Okay, so out of role play, this is where we want to know our stuff then. Okay, so back into role play. Okay, that makes perfect sense. We see this all the time. So support will definitely be a part of it. And then the handoff won't take too terribly long. So we're looking about a week. So that would put us back to, and I would have a calendar up in front of me, and I would ask them to do it. So looking at the calendar, what about 5 business days before the first? So what is that? And just make something up. We'll just say the 23rd, right? So 2/23. All right. So 2/23 for that handoff. And then from a training perspective, out of role play, how long does training typically take in this world?
Yeah, training usually takes about 3 to 4 business days.
Okay. So we'll say worst case 4 business days. So that takes us back to 19. Okay. So we'll do training here. And then the implementation of getting everything in order out of role play, how long is that going to take?
Implementation, 3 days.
3 days? Okay. So implementation typically takes about 3 days. So that will take us to 16th. Now I want to do business days, right? So this is already off. So I'm doing business days. So I'm probably back to like 210 at this point. So we'll just say 210. All right. So we do the implementation. Now you talked about going through the approval process. How is your legal like mine, and they take forever to do this? How long is legal really taking these days?
Absolutely. So usually it usually takes about 10 days, but being with the importance of this project here, hopefully we can get that done within 5.
Okay, so
'cause they're anticipating, it coming through, so.
okay, so roughly, so why don't we say 7 days? So that takes us to the 3rd. So that's going to be approval, or legal rather. And then who all is involved with this? I mean, let's talk about, because we're going to have the users, we have those who are impacted. So give me a sense of just first names, who's all impacted by this?
So, myself, my boss, we'll say Rick, and then the VP, and then this will go all the way up to the CEO and his team. So we're looking at maybe a chain of command of about 3 people.
Okay, now out of role play, I just put up on the screen what's called a relationship chart.
Mhm.
So if you notice here, what we've done is we've already backed into, we don't have a lot of time yet. I mean, this needed to be done like 3 weeks ago for everything to do this perfectly. And this is the beauty about this. By laying out this timeline and you're just working it back, you're solutioning it with them because they didn't even think about it. The ideas are going to go, holy crap, we can't hit this date.
Mhm.
Well, what should we do? Like, let's work through this, right? So now it's you and that person against the world. So what I did here is we went through legal, but then we also have approval, that buy-in. So we need to know who's all involved. And I say a really nice tactic is if you ask first name only, that first name only allows them to feel a little bit more comfortable. Now, hopefully you would have had this chart already laid out, right? Especially whenever I'm in a complex situation. So Wade and Devin, whenever you're going after those larger ones, not necessarily for a staffing play, but maybe that more custom stuff. So the Quill, I would guess that you're almost always needing to use this stuff, right? Because you're likely going to have 3, 5, 7 people involved. Now,
Right.
check this out, and this is nerve-wracking. If I look at their decision-making authority, and then influence, and then advocacy, how much do they like us? It's a multiplication problem, not an addition problem. So I can have a negative 125 relationship. If it's a 5 decision-making authority and a 5 influence, and they hate us, that's a negative 125. What's the likelihood of you winning that deal?
Not good.
Not good, right? So I would chuck that one to the curb. Now, here's the thing though. Let's say that it's this. What happens if it's a 5, 5, and a 1 because they don't know you? If it's a big enough deal, now you have to make actions to get to know Chris, the CFO.
Mhm.
And so you can use this as action steps to help get the deal pushed through. And so from this, you get a really good sense of, and as you do this over time, you can benchmark what's the minimum score that we need in order to win this. And if we can't get to that score, depending on how complex, I don't know how complex your scoping and everything else goes into play, but there was one company that I was working with, they had something like their cost to submit a proposal was over $20,000. So they would pay $20,000, or would cost them $20,000. So this right here became really important, where they would start to scope or start to benchmark. If we can't at least get to this score, we're not doing this. And so it was an earlier no. So they had less in the pipeline, but more wins by leveraging this. So you'll really want to work as you're going through this to ensure that you have everyone, because there are hidden decision makers and hidden influencers that you wouldn't even consider. Like I'm in a group called Vistage, and we have a network within Vistage that people will ask the craziest questions to complete strangers, but because they're in Vistage, they'll use that as a decision maker or as an influencer. And if you don't have that in your chart, you can be missing something. So we really want to ask the questions of who else have you considered? And really laying out all of the considerations, because remember, if it's a bomb, if it's going to blow up, we want to know as soon as possible. We don't want to get surprised by a hidden decision maker in the background, nor do we want to deal with only the people that can say no. So this is why that relationship chart is so critically important. So let me just pause here, get some feedback off of this. Questions on how to use this.
Yeah, Brian. So I think from my perspective, I understand, figuring out who those influencers are is obviously the key to this. And then I think once I've got some names, understanding decision-making authority and influence seems doable. The advocacy part seems difficult to me. Like, how am I supposed to determine the advocacy part here?
So it's a great question. If they don't know you, I would do it as a 1 or maybe a -1, right? Because it doesn't help you, but it can hurt you. So I would put it as a 1 or maybe a -1. If they know you, you're going to hang out at their birthday party, right? They love you. That's a 5. If you've worked with them in the past and you did such a horrible job, you got fired, they got fired over your implementation, that's a -5. So you really have to just define it. How much do they know you and trust you and like you? That's really what that advocacy score is. So if they don't know you, you're like at a 1, -1. It's never a 0 though.
Got it.
Does that help?
Yep, makes total sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, this is the part that I hate because I don't like the plan. I don't like admin stuff. However, for big enough deals, I cannot encourage you enough to do this and create a plan to go after this, especially if you're talking 500,000 to $1 million opportunity. It's worth the work. And once you have it, it's a little bit easier to do, right? If you do a couple of these a month, you're going to be good to go. All right, so we get all of those people at play here. And so then anyone here setting up times to talk with each and every one of those that were mentioned on that relationship chart. Take that as a no. So it's called multi-threading, right? So you want to have as many people involved as possible. And so if you go, hey, would it make sense to maybe take 5-10 minutes, I'll reach out to each and every one of these, take 5-10 minutes and find out from their perspective, what's important for them? Because the last thing that I would want to do for you, DeQuil, is make a suggestion, recommendation that doesn't put you in the best light, because they're going to have their own viewpoint and their own perspectives. So what we found is to reduce the risk of you getting thrown under the bus is us to take 5-10 minutes, have a conversation with them, get their perspective, and then we'll come back to you and say, hey, this is what we found out. Does this change anything so you can still get what you want? Right? Something along those lines. So let me just pause and get feedback on that idea, that approach.
No, I like that
think-
approach a lot. And what we do here, that's one of the approaches that we do take, only because usually it's not a decision that affects just one person within the organization. And usually those folks are kind of tied together, right? It's usually they have the one person who's tackling the issue, going out, reaching out, trying to find the solution. And then once they find that, we bring them all together, and then we can actually hear the total issue from different aspects, so we know exactly how to scope it moving forward.
100%. And you were going to say, Devin?
Yeah, I was gonna say, from conversations I've had where this has cropped up, generally, and maybe I'm having this conversation too early, but I feel like in the past, because this approach makes a lot of sense to me, but what I feel like I found is people saying, oh, yeah, we've got to get some other people involved. I don't know who all is going to be at the table, sort of thing yet. How do we approach that?
Love
Because I
that.
like the first name thing because I think it gives everyone a really good, like you said, takes the pressure off and that sort of stuff. But where I struggle is when they say, yeah, we've got to get some people involved. I don't really know who else is going to be involved yet.
Yeah, and I love the real world on this one, right? So that asking for the first name only and say, well, that makes perfect sense. Would it help to maybe share with you what we found in the past, and let's work through this together. Oftentimes, you're going to have a couple of people, like one, the end user. So I'm not sure how much the end user you want involved with this, and then you would talk through that, and then you would say, and then looking at this purchase, who all is going to be impacted, what different departments, and then you get the department. So you start high and then you dig down a layer, down a layer, down a layer, down a layer, and then you say, all right, and then from the the finance side, I'm guessing you're going to have to go, is it controller level purchasing? Oh, no, it's a CFO. Okay, got it. So we should probably talk with the CFO at some point, right? And so you're just playing that, what was that guy's name? Columbo, right? You're playing that Columbo of just asking questions, leading them as a guide. DeQuill, you came off mute. Did you had some look like you had something to say?
Oh, no. The birds have stopped chirping, that's all.
So does that help, Devin?
Yep. Okay. That's perfect. Thank you. I think start high with the departments probably makes sense, and then we can sort of niche down from there.
Yeah, correct. Because, and this is where you can show your expertise by the questions that you ask, right? So here's one thing. Let me give you this takeaway as really tactical. Never, never, never. And I rarely say never always, but this is a never. Never ask, are you the decision maker? Ever, right? Because imagine that. Hey, listen, I'm getting the sense that you're an idiot and no one really trusts you. And so they're surely not going to allow you to make a decision. So who should I really be talking to? Right? That's kind of what we're saying in that question. So whenever we ask this type of stuff, it should be things like, well, I'm kind of curious. As you were planning this out, Devin, what are all the users that will be doing this? Which departments will be using it? What level people? Who else is going to be impacted? Who are you going to lean on to kind of get some advice? Who else are you going to be talking to? Who are you going to be seeking feedback from? So these are all different ways that I could say that without being, hey, you're a scumbag and can't make a decision.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So, all right. And so we would keep taking this back and back and back, right? So now we have to set up all those conversations. That's going to take about 10 days. And then we have to do a POC. I'm kind of curious, how long is that POC, right? And you just keep taking it back and back and back. So you're just having a conversation, solutioning this out together right on this map in front of them. You're doing this right in front of them. Or if you're online like I am, you can draw it right on a whiteboard, right? Just do it with them so they see this and you're working through it together. They're going to point out areas where you've missed. Oh, crap. We need to talk to blankety blankety blank. Oh, okay. Right. So it's just, solving this together. And so you're working with them as their advocate as opposed to a salesperson. So it really helps to build up trust. So in order of time, or just for time's sake, questions on this, because my fear is it's super simple to understand, but not always the easiest to implement the first time. So questions on this?
No, I like
probably
this.
have some.
Okay.
Go for it, DeQuill.
No, I was just going to comment that I like this. This is something that we have incorporated in our process when dealing with our customers, is the timeline. And just based on, because of what we do in our dealings with our customer, the timeline is very, very critical in having that conversation with our customers. So,
what you're going to say, Devin?
So yeah, this is fairly new for an approach that we would take. So I was just saying, I almost feel like I need to just try it and fail at it and see what questions I have before I have any immediate ones.
So here's my encouragement. Fail in the simulator, right? So you and Wade or you and Christiana role play this out a couple of times and work through it. That way your first time isn't in front of a prospect.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds good. Wade, let's find time. Maybe even later today we can do this.
Yeah, I agree.
And the nice thing is, once you do this and you've gotten it down a couple of times, you can be their coach and walking them through this, because oftentimes they have no idea. They've really never thought through this. And so you can help them avoid roadblocks and everything else. So one of the key things that we'd want to ask off of this is, hey, what roadblocks can you see jumping in the way of this? I mean, how do I help you win? What do we need to make sure that we avoid? Right? Who's going to be opposed to this? Who's going to help you champion this? So knowing all of those things so we can get that on a relationship chart is going to be critically key. Now, here's another thing that's going to happen. You're going to get wishy-washy people, especially in corporate America. I mean, oh my gosh, they're scared to death and they're political. They don't want to make a decision, right? So in helping them to make a decision, this is a 5 steps to the truth. Okay. So I think it was Devin that you were talking about a little earlier, saying that, yeah, let me talk to them. Right. Let me talk to them and I'll see what they say. Right. Ever hear something like that? Because they're not ready, willing, and able to make any and all investments, meaning political capital to make introductions. Right. So that's a deal breaker oftentimes. So we can leverage this 5 steps to the truth. So it'd be something like this. I appreciate that, Devin. Makes perfect sense. Out of role play, I want to always meet them where they're at, right? That principle of influence, that principle of likability, I want to meet them where they're at. Hey, it makes perfect sense. And then you sigh a lot, right? You have to struggle. This is an act. Devin, can I ask you kind of a pointed, difficult question?
Sure.
Okay. And listen, probably not the case here. Nurture, protect them, right? Allow them to feel a little bit more comfortable. So probably not the case here. I was working with another group very similar to yours, Devin, and we were in the same situation where it seemed like, at least from a high level, that it made sense to move forward. But much like you, the person that I was dealing with, DeQuill, was a little bit apprehensive in taking this or taking me with him to the others involved, because they were afraid that I would sell them or something like that, and it ended up blowing up. And DeQuill didn't get this win, and he's still struggling through the same challenges that you are. So I guess I'm kind of curious. Is it that you're concerned that I'm going to come across as a sales guy, and that's why you're not going to make that introduction?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of exploring all the options open to us still. And I'm, not sure we're ready to take you in particular, to the group at large.
And now I got the truth. And that's the whole purpose of this. So from there, then, because you never know what anyone's going to say, right? So from there, then you just peel back. Okay, makes perfect sense. And then you go like this. And this is how to get a decision. Knowing that there's others involved, and that you're looking at other people, I guess out of curiosity, why us? Why would you take this? Right? That's a right or win question. Who else are you dealing with? Well, I don't want to relinquish that. Okay, let's say company A and B. Between company A and B, which do you like better? So I'm going through this, the criteria. So, hey, between A and B, who do you like better? A. Oh, what is it about A that you like? Blank, blank, and blank. Great, jot that down. Make sure that you can offer that. If you can't offer that, then you got an issue, deal with it now. And how about B? What about B don't you like? Well, I don't like this, this, and this. Make sure you don't do any of that. So this gets you a way to have better insights without even going to anyone or doing anything. So that's the criteria that we want to use. So I appreciate you letting me know that. So Devin, knowing that there are others involved, and I know this isn't the case, but if this was your decision and your decision alone, what would you do?
If it was totally up to me, I'd be trying to move this project along a little bit faster, because I'm pretty involved in being on point for this or something like that. But I've still got to do I guess talks with a few other folks before I feel like I know what the right move is here.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So now I got it broken down. If Devin said, well, and made a whole bunch of excuses, guess what? He's not buying you and you're dead. But if Devin said what he just did, then you say, okay, got it. Well, I guess out of curiosity, what about us is having you think that this is the best way? And now he reinforces why he wants to buy from us. So that's the reinforced why he wants to buy. And then you go with dealing with the objections. This is that right or win tactic, and this is going to scare the snot out of you, especially if you don't have a big pipeline. I guess, Devin, looking at the other people involved, I mean, they're going to tell you, hey, Devin, we don't like this. We want something different. What are you going to say? And you start practicing with Devin all of the potential objections. This is a lot of money. What are you going to say to him? This is going to take a long time. What are you going to say? So whatever those most common objections are, get it out of the way right here. And if that person is wishy-washy and they're not saying, no, we need this, it's not expensive at all. If you don't have that buy-in from them, you need to go back to that pain and revisit that pain. Because what you're trying to do here is get a decision or get a no. And so that's the way that you'd want to do it. So you really isolate it down to, if it was your decision and your decision alone, what would you do? Reinforce it as long as they want it. If they don't want it, then you have to deal with the truth and bring it back to that earlier part. Whenever, hey, help me understand. It seems like you've already decided against this. So that's the nurture. Use that story. Hey, it seems to me that maybe you've already decided against this, and then you deal with the truth. Because the whole idea behind this is to get to the truth so you can deal with it. All right, questions on that? We went through that a little bit quickly.
Brian, can you go back to the last slide you were just on?
This one?
Okay, yep. Just wanted to make sure I saw what 4 was on there. Thank you.
Yep. And then I also put it out here to give you some language that you might want to use. So the when, the how do you go about it, who's all involved, the criteria that they're going to be using, and ideally best practice is getting everyone's, and then dealing with the showstoppers, really working through all of that. And if you can get that to come through, you should be pretty good. Does it mean you're going to win everything? No, but you're going to have a lot more visibility than you would otherwise. All right, so let's end this out. A couple of days before the new year, for goodness sakes. Let's get 1 or 2 takeaways. Take a second 1, 2 takeaways, and we'll get you running.
I really like the timeline aspect. Like I said, we do utilize that here in our organization. I like the way you kind of broke it down, moving backwards. A lot of the way we use it is more automated.
Okay.
But the manual aspect of it, I think, is great. And I think personally, I'm going to kind of use that exercise to kind of sharpen that up, even though we use it on a more automated type of situation. But the manual really kind of gives you the insight. Okay, this is how we're doing it, and kind of really does walk it back. And it also helps to make sure that you're covering all your bases, right? That you're hitting all the steps within the process. So I like that version of it.
Good. Yeah, and there's likely a way that you could do a blended. So here's our automation, let's work backwards and see where this is off. Maybe something as easy as that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
nice. Love that. What else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from what I've observed while Devin's kind of holding these types of meetings is that we probably do some form of this timeline, especially with the way that our projects are going, especially on like the consulting side. There are a lot of teams. There's, you're working with project managers. We have to get those people on a call on our side. We have to get those people on a call from their side. So I do think like a more concrete framework would help us. So those, minute details don't really get kind of lost in translation. And goes to show how you really don't have as much time as you probably think you do. So like, I think, when you're working back on that timeline, you saw that you actually only had, 3 days to get everything in order when it came to legal and everything. So I think Devin, we should definitely maybe play something like this out, whether it be, later today or tomorrow and get this, kind of set up.
And the interesting thing off of this, I'm sorry, I was going to say the interesting thing off of this, Wade, is that you're dealing with a lot of times with the three of you, Devin, Wade, and DeQuille, you're dealing with engineers, you're dealing with project managers. And so your level of professionalism goes up exponentially compared to others by doing this, because that way it's a roadmap with stage gates and times and date stamps and everything else, right? I'm going a little overboard there, but you get the idea. So I think that really allows that trust and credibility to increase greatly. So sorry, Devin, I cut you off.
No, I just think that this approach is really cool because it does a couple things. Like to everyone's point, one, the timeline just, it puts a sense of urgency on these a little bit more because, if there's anything I've learned about these projects, it's that everyone's under pressure for time, and really showing them how under the gun they are, I think just puts urgency on the project in general, if there wasn't already. And then two, it pulls the prospect into more of an advocacy position for you. I don't want to say against, but against the rest of the team, and you're sort of prepping that person now as someone on your team to advocate for you to everyone else. And I just think that that's the best way to win that.
100%, because it's you and them against the world, right? Because they have a problem. They know that you can help them solve it. So it's you two working through this together and grabbing additional champions along the way to build up momentum. So absolutely. Josh, take away from you.
Yeah, the process is everything. It's going to help me with detail orientation. It's going to help me with communication. And I really need to give that more respect.
Yeah. So you don't have to like detail. You just have to do it, right? So that's kind of the frustration. And you can also do this more simplified. So whenever we take this from a hiring perspective, we're not necessarily going to have that whole entire relationship chart. So whenever we're looking at hiring or staffing, we can do it a lot more quickly. Hey, when's the latest that you would want this person in seat, trained up, and you're seeing the results from them, right? You put that date, and then you can reverse engineer it from when they want that in there, and then give them the reality of what this thing's going to be like. So that's another way that you can do it a little bit more quickly whenever you're looking from a staffing recruiting perspective. Doesn't have to be as detailed as what we did it here. Okay. All right, gang. Well, hey, thanks so much for sticking with me 9 weeks. I'd really appreciate feedback. Just shoot me an email with some feedback. What did you like about this? What did you find best? What did you hate? And we'll always look to improve this. So I really appreciate it. Have an awesome 2022 and look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, thank you too, Brian.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brian.
man.